Hey guys, Magnus Robert here, and I'm bringing you a bit of a different video today. Now, I have done this in the past where I did like a big Walking Dead family tree, but I've always wanted to do like a bit less of a messy one and one that's a bit more focused. So today that's what we're going to be doing, and we're going to be going through with it. So I have included sort of people who characters have dated and also characters who have been adopted by certain characters just to flesh the tree out and make it a bit more interesting. Otherwise, the tree would be quite short and sweet. And I think it's just makes it more cool and there's more to talk about when we include people's dates and also any adoptions that have happened. So I'm going to be using the word dating as well very loosely. So I just want to mention that now because I know I'm going to have some comments of being people saying like this character just had sex with this character, they never dated. So yes, I am using dating as a very sort of loose term. So of course we're going to be starting with Rick Grimes, who is sort of the center of this tree. Every character who's connected to Rick is obviously... Well, Rick's the start of the tree is what I'm trying to say. So actually we do learn about Rick's parents. So we of course have his father, Mr. Grimes, who we actually learn was a farmer and set crops on fire for insurance fraud. And as a result of this was actually very badly burned. And he died some point before the apocalypse, I think from what we can tell when Rick was fairly young. And then we have, of course, Rick's mother, who we don't actually know the fate of. That's why there's a question mark next to her name, because we don't know if she's alive. She most likely isn't, but there's every chance that she could still be alive. Now, we learned that she actually told the truth about the farm fire to Rick, and that's how he learned that his father was doing insurance fraud. But we also learn that she was the one who told him the Rock in the Road speech, which, of course, Rick then later tells King Ezekiel about. And finally, we have Rick's paternal grandfather, who I've just labelled Mr. Grimes Sr. We actually learn that he was a World War II veteran, and he is mentioned during the We Are the Walking Dead speech. And of course, now he would be dead. Now, Rick actually potentially has a sibling. Now, comic fans, of course, might be asking, where is Jeffrey on this tree? But Jeffrey Grimes is actually never mentioned in the show. But Carl mentions an aunt, Evie, who probably also could be Laurie's sister too, or even maybe a great aunt instead. But I've decided, just to make this tree less messy as it already is, to just say that she's Rick's sister. And I kind of imagine this, for me, it's my personal headcanon, that she's a gender-swapped version of Jeffrey Grimes. So everyone in the chat, ask for our Evie Grimes Tales of the Walking Dead episode, please. So, of course I mentioned Laurie, so let's go to her. So, Laurie, of course, married Rick, and they were actually childhood sweethearts. They dated in high school. We learn about Laurie's mother, who has passed, so that's why she is on this tree. For anyone who is wondering why I have not put Laurie's father, is I'm only putting family members who the characters have mentioned, as opposed to just putting like mother, father, grandfather, you know. So because Laurie's mother was mentioned, I've placed her here because we know that she is, of course, dead as well. Now, both Rick and Laurie, of course, married, and eventually they had a son called Carl Grimes. Now, Carl Grimes unfortunately died in Season 8 of The Walking Dead after helping Sadiq honor his mother. I know, it sounds very stupid when you put it like that, but that's exactly how he died. So, this left Rick for a time without any biological children. Now, Carl actually dated a character called Enid in Season 7, and I suppose Season 8 as well. Now, Enid, of course, died in Season 9 after she was decapitated by the Whisperer leader, Alpha. Now, we do see Enid's parents in a flashback, but of course they are devoured by walkers, and Enid is unfortunately forced to watch. Now, after Carl died, some years later, Enid, of course, dated a man named Alden. Now, Alden dies in Season 11 due to a Reaper, who, of course, slits his throat. And we don't learn much about Alden's life before, apart from he had a father who wasn't very good to him, And he also had a brother who died some point during the apocalypse, and Alden avenged his brother by killing his brother's killer, but it didn't bring Alden much joy. Now, before Alden died, he actually adopted a boy called Adam. Now, Adam was originally adopted by Alden's mentor, a man named Earl Sutton, and of course his wife, Tammy Rose Sutton. So, Tammy and Earl found Adam, and they decided to adopt him after they lost their son, Kenneth Sutton. Now, Kenneth died from both a walker bite and a horse kicking him in the stomach. Now, eventually, Tammy Rose was also killed by Alpha, just like Enid was, and Earl eventually was bitten by a walker and turned before he was put down by Judith Grimes. So, going back to Adam's line, that left him without without parents. So, of course, Alden stepped in and adopted him. But before Alden was adopted by by Earl and Tammy, his mother was, of course, a woman called Frances, who was a member of the Whisperers. Now, of course, Frances abandoned Adam to the zombies after she was ordered to by Alpha. Now, Frances, sometime after this, was killed by her sister Mary, and eventually Mary defects to the coalition and helps the group defeat the Whisperers until she is killed by Beta. Now, we do, of course, learn about their parents as well. Mary does mention them. We know that their father was called John and their mother was called Alice. But all we really know about them is they lived by a large lake in Santa Monica. So going back to Enid, before she dated Carl and Alden, she actually dated Ron Anderson, who, of course, was a character in seasons 5 and 6 and died after Michonne stabbed him, preventing him from shooting Rick, but also resulting in Carl's eye being lost. His brother is, of course, Sam Anderson, and he died just before Ron did, after being traumatized by Carol and being overwhelmed by all the zombies that, of course, he attracted to him, and then they devoured him. Now, their parents were Jesse Anderson and Pete Anderson. Pete Anderson, of course, was the Alexandria's doctor, but he was abusing his wife Jessie and was executed by Rick Grimes under Deanna's orders after Pete had accidentally killed Deanna's husband, Reg Monroe. Now, Jessie Anderson, of course, died in between her two children dying, and she was, of course, devoured by zombies. But before she died, she was, of course, dating Rick Grimes. So that brings us back to Rick. Before Rick actually dated Laurie, though, I just want to quickly mention he dated a woman called Sheila, or I guess a girl called Sheila, because from the sounds of it, this was a fairly young relationship. He, of course, told Shane that he told Shane that he got to a particular base with Sheila, but he got the bases mixed up, so Shane thought Rick was lying. So, of course, other than the child he had with Laurie, which of course was Carl Grimes, Rick has one other biological child, which he of course had with Michonne Hawthorne. Now, Rick and Michonne, the showrunners say, were technically married, albeit not officially. So I've decided to use the straight line instead of the dotted line that signals dating. I've used the familiar straight line instead. Although we don't officially see it, we do see that Rick proposes to Michonne in The Ones Who Live, but we can assume that they married after that anyway, officially, so I'm going to continue with the line. So the reason why I've put Michonne Hawthorne and not Grimes is because we actually learn about her maiden name. Most other characters, female characters, we don't actually know their maiden name, so I've just put their married name. But here we actually know her maiden name, so I've decided to put that instead. So we do learn about Michonne's mother, who was fairly middle class and passed away during Michonne being in college, and her friend Jocelyn helped Michonne get through this death. Now, later on, after graduating college, Michonne started dating a man called Mike, and together they had a child called Andre Anthony. Now, Andre Anthony unfortunately died during the start of the apocalypse, where he essentially was killed by walkers because of the neglect of Mike and his best friend Terry. And as a result of this, Michonne, of course, waited for both Mike and Terry to die, and when they turned into zombies, she turned them into her infamous walker pets that she has in Season 3. So, both Michonne and Rick have one more child, albeit not a biological one. They both have a third child, who is, of course, someone they adopted. Now, this is the child known as Judith Grimes, of course, if you didn't know. Now, Judith is actually biologically the child of both Laurie and Shane. So, after Rick was shot and put in the hospital, and of course the world went to shit and collapsed, both Laurie and Shane, sort of in their grief of losing Rick, decided to sort of comfort each other and developed a romantic relationship. Shane, of course, being Rick's best friend. Now, because both of these were in high school together along with Rick, it's very possible they had feelings for each other one way or another before that, but from what we can tell, it was something that formed after the apocalypse started. So, of course, they both believe Rick to be dead, and after Rick is found out to be alive, Laurie breaks it off with Shane, which eventually leads Shane to plot to kill his best friend, forcing Rick to instead kill Shane. So, Shane actually has pretty interesting history. First of all, we don't really know much about his parents, but we do know that he has a grandmother called Jean, because he does talk about, or Rick talks about, Shane stealing flowers from his grandmother when he's in the hospital, which would mean that Jean probably now would be dead, but was likely alive near the start of the apocalypse, although she would be in her 90s to 100s, so I very much doubt that she's alive currently. So I've just confirmed that she is dead. So, Shane, for lack of a better word, we also don't know if Jean is a paternal or maternal grandmother, so I've just sort of put her above his parents. So, Shane, for lack of a better word, was a bit of a player back in his day, as well as dating Laurie. He'd also dated many other women. So, one of his high school loves was Patricia Taylor. Now, we learn about Patricia in the Dead Reckoning game. Whilst Rick was dating Laurie, Shane was dating her. But it didn't work out, and they eventually broke up sometime after high school. Now, Patricia is, of course, seen in the Dead Reckoning game, and we find out that she has been bitten, and Shane is forced to put her down. She's actually one of the very first zombies that Shane is forced to put down. Her father is, of course, Gary Taylor, and the reason why he's got both a cross and a question mark is because we don't know whether or not he is alive or dead. In the game, it's a determined status is what I'm trying to say. In the game, he can either die or he can be spared, although he most likely probably dies sometime after the events of the game. I've also included Gary's cat just for the shits and giggles. Of course, Patricia also dated Paul, who was killed by Gary after he had turned. So going back to Shane's other lovers, we of course have a few more here. We have Holly, who was sort of known as a bit of a town slut, I guess. She was a woman who was known to have slept around a lot, and of course Shane confirmed that he had also had sex with her. We have Mary Ann, who was a woman who worked at a Dairy Queen that Shane had had sex with, and also a teacher called Miss Kelly, who was the high school girls volleyball coach. Shane had sex with her, despite her being married to her husband, Mr. Kelly. And the final one of Shane's sort of hookups and dates is Andrea Harrison. So, this is a sexual relationship he has in Season 2. Now, Andrea opens up a whole other can of worms, like a whole other tree, and this tree was already pretty messy and horrible as it is, so this is what I'm going to use as a jumping off point for Part 2, if you're all up for that. So that's it for the tree. I hope you've enjoyed. I find these really fascinating and really interesting to explore, and let me know if you would like to see a part 2. This was, of course, the Grimes tree, and I've tried to be as very loose as possible to get as many characters in it as I can. I did consider going down the surrogate uncle, surrogate aunt route with Judith, but it just made it too big, and I thought it was more interesting to look at some of these more obscure characters, like the Dead Reckoning game, including that, and also including sort of the dates, and being strict with the adoption and dates only. Some people might be asking where are the rest of the pets, because I included the cat, but again, it was getting too messy, so I neglected to add, like, Michonne's horse Flame, or the piglets that Carl sort of adopts, or, you know, any of the other characters' pets. But anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you have enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts on the tree, and let me know if you definitely want to see a part 2. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.